As I entered Harper's house, I opened the door to a room that looked like an old storage shed. Then, in the corner of the pitch-dark room, I found Susan.
What in the world happened?
I called out, and Susan looked up. Her complexion was terribly poor.
Grandma!
Next to Susan, there were textbooks and workbooks.
How long have you been in a place like this? And without even turning on the light? For a year, I've been right here. What?
A year in a place like this, studying? And around her, there were bowls and cups too. So, she was eating here as well.
Can you tell me what's going on, for Grandma?
I took Susan's hand and spoke to her. After hearing Susan's story, I couldn't hide my shock. I couldn't believe she had been through something so awful. Harper was the root of all evil. As I left the storage room, I was absolutely livid. I found Harper and screamed at her, shaking with anger.
What were you thinking? Locking a child up in a place like that? What you're doing is wrong.
Just as Harper began to retort, the front door opened, and someone entered the house.
How could you?
I watched Harper with a cold gaze. My name is Hannah Kirk, 63 years old. Currently, I live with my husband, Ken, just the two of us, and I'm a homemaker. Ken is turning 65 this year. He's retired, and we're spending our days relaxing at home. Our children are our eldest son, Caleb, and our second son, Sean. Caleb is 38 years old, and Sean is 34. They've long since flown the nest and built their own families, and now we only see them during the holidays, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Since our second son and his wife don't have kids, our only grandchild is Caleb's daughter, Susan. Susan is turning 8 this year, a lively and adorable little girl. She always talks to us, saying "Grandma, Grandma," and gifts us with her amazing drawings. The illustration she made of Ken and me smiling is displayed in the most prominent spot in our living room. Every time we see it, it warms our hearts. I wonder how Susan is doing. It's about time we saw her again, Ken says, squinting his eyes.
Yes, I'd love to see a bunch of her drawings again.
Susan must be happily drawing even today. We believed so. But at this time, we couldn't have imagined the unexpected events that were happening to Susan. It was on a sunny morning. The doorbell rang, and I opened the door. Standing there was Harper.
It's been a while, Hannah. Oh, Harper. What's going on?
I was surprised. Harper is Caleb's wife. Since they live about a 3-hour train ride from here, they rarely come to our house. I wondered what could have happened.
Sorry for the sudden visit. I have a favor to ask. What is it? Come in, anyway.
I led Harper into the living room. Ken was also surprised to see Harper, who we hadn't seen in a while. Harper is the same age as Caleb, 38. She looked the same as the last time we saw her, with light makeup and simple clothing. But she seemed to have a tired look on her face. Without even touching the tea I offered, Harper started to speak.
Hannah and Ken, actually, I need to borrow some money. What? Why's that? It's for Susan's tutoring fees. She's already attending one, but we're thinking of enrolling her in another one known for its track record in getting students into competitive schools. Tutoring.
I was surprised. Susan is still in elementary school. I didn't think she needed tutoring. I was about to say so, but times have changed since my day, and I don't know much about the current educational climate. So, I couldn't outright deny it.
Susan wants to be a lawyer. That's why we need to focus on her studies from now.
This is the first I've heard of it. Susan was supposed to be a child who loved drawing.
I thought she said she wanted to do something with her drawing skills before.
I tilted my head in confusion. Then, Harper's eyes widened with intensity.
How can you say that? There's no way that's true. Susan is going to be a lawyer, no matter what anyone says. So please, lend us the money.
Harper's forcefulness completely intimidated Ken and me. If that's the case, we need to check with Caleb. Ken began, but Harper quickly regained her composure and responded with a smile.
Don't worry, Ken. Caleb agrees with this. We'll pay you back as soon as we get our bonus. But she's already attending one tutoring school, right? And you want to enroll her in another one? Hannah, the competition starts from elementary school these days. If she doesn't excel in her studies, she'll be left behind in society. It's for Susan's future. Please understand, I beg you.
Now she was pleading with tears in her eyes. Ken and I looked at each other and fell silent. It's hard to refuse when it's for Susan's future.
I'd at least like to hear it directly from Susan.
Susan is currently studying at home without any distractions. She doesn't want to waste time and is working very hard. Please don't disturb her. As adults, it's our job to support Susan's wishes as much as we can, isn't it?
Is that so? How much do you need?
For now, just $2,000 for the summer course fees.
The payment deadline is approaching.
Ken sighed.
All right. If it's what Susan wants. Yes. I'll withdraw it from the bank.
So, we ended up lending the money to Harper. But it was also new to us. The idea that Susan wanted to become a lawyer. Yet, we are just grandparents and not living together. It's not unusual for kids to change their minds. I convinced myself of that. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, while reading the newspaper, Ken looked up and said softly,
You know, about Susan wanting to be a lawyer. If that's really what she wants, of course, I'll support her. It just came out of nowhere. Yes, maybe we should try to hear it from Susan herself.
I decided to make a call. Since Susan doesn't have a cell phone, I had no choice but to contact Harper.
Oh, Harper?
Thanks for last time. Is Susan there? Can I talk to her?
Susan? She can't come to the phone.
She's busy. Harper answered bluntly. Just for a little while, I insisted. Then Harper started yelling suddenly.
Just a little while. What if she misses solving a problem in that time? The entrance test for that tutoring school we talked about is coming up. The results will determine her class placement. She has to get into the top class, or she'll fall behind. Do you have any idea how hard it is to catch up after that?
Overwhelmed by Harper's tirade, I was taken aback. With Harper not budging, I had no choice but to hang up. How did it go? Ken asked worriedly. I shook my head. No good. Harper won't let her talk.
What? Why? I don't understand either. I'll call Caleb.
I searched for Caleb's name in my smartphone contacts. Actually, Caleb hasn't been living with Harper for about a year. He's been on a business assignment alone. Thankfully, he's been well regarded by his company, and he mentioned last year with pride that a promotion was promised once he returned from this assignment. I didn't want to drag him into this if I could avoid it, but at this point, I had no choice. Caleb picked up the phone right away. Hello?
Oh, it's you, Mom. Sorry to bother you when you're busy. It's about Susan.
I briefly explained the exchange I had with Harper. Caleb was surprised.
What? Susan wants to be a lawyer? That's news to me.
It seemed Caleb was hearing this for the first time too. He also wasn't aware that Harper had become so enthusiastic about education. Being away from home for a year, that's not surprising.
I'm not sure what's going on, but Harper must have started some weird talk. I'm swamped with work right now. It'll be a while before I can come home, but I'll try to talk to them directly next time. That might be best. I don't want to overstep, but Harper's sudden change is somewhat worrying. Is it really that strange? Oh, now that you mention it, speaking of lawyers.
what Caleb told me. It was enough to stoke my worries. On the weekend, Ken and I had come to Harper's house. It's our eldest son and his wife's place. Maybe it's wrong for me to interfere, but I had a bad feeling. After all, I'd only heard Harper's yelling, not a peep from Susan herself. I wanted to know what Susan thought. Plus, Caleb wasn't here right now. I wondered how Susan was doing, just with Harper. We rang the doorbell and introduced ourselves, and a flustered Harper answered. "What's going on, Hannah, you two?" Harper was clearly flustered. "We were visiting a friend in the area and decided to stop by on our way back," I replied with a smile. A little white lie. "By the way, is Susan here?" At my question, Harper became flustered. "Well, she's not feeling well and is resting in the back. I'm sorry you came all this way. Just seeing her face for a bit would be okay." "No, but I don't think she'll want to see anyone. So, maybe today is not good." Harper was adamant about not letting us see Susan, not budging an inch. Something felt off. Then, Ken suddenly exclaimed, "Ow! My back! My chronic back pain is acting up." Ken was clutching his back, crouching down in pain. "Are you okay?" Ken gave me a look. He was signaling an opportunity. "Harper, do you know if there's a chiropractor around here?" I think there might be. We left our taxi waiting over there. Could you show us the way? Sorry for the trouble." Ken forcefully asked Harper for directions and headed towards the taxi. While watching them leave, I muttered an apology, "Sorry about this, Harper," and then entered the house. It was silent, with no sign of anyone around. I opened each room door, searching for Susan. "Susan? Where are you, Susan?" She wasn't in any of them. The only place left was an old and used storage room. With resolve, I opened the door. There, in the dark room, was Susan. "What in the world happened?" When I spoke, Susan looked up. Seeing Susan's face after so long, she seemed to have a terribly pale complexion. Textbooks and workbooks were cramped together nearby. "Grandma, why are you in a place like this? And without even turning on the lights? I've been studying here all this time. They said it costs too much to use electricity, so I've been solving problems using a flashlight." Susan spoke weakly. "Since when?" "For a year, I've been here all this time." "What? Studying in a place like this for a year?" And there were bowls and cups around. Was she eating here too? "Can you tell Grandma what's going on?" I took Susan's hand and spoke to her. "But..." Susan hesitated. Maybe she was afraid of Harper. "It's okay, Susan. Grandma is on your side." With that, Susan started to cry and began to speak haltingly. The story Susan told went like this. About a year ago, when Caleb went on a solo business assignment and it was just Susan and Harper living together, Harper changed. Harper had said to Susan, who usually loved drawing, "Susan, you're already 8. It's time to start focusing more on your studies, considering middle school entrance exams. Stop wasting time on those silly drawings." Of course, Susan tried to argue. But Harper wouldn't listen. Worse yet, she tore up Susan's drawings. "Listen, the drawings that won't help your future need to stop. You're going to be a lawyer. You'll be respected by everyone, and it's a job that helps people. That's good, right?" Harper had said, with a smile on her face. From then on, Susan's days became hellish. She was ordered to attend tutoring classes and complete a massive amount of homework every day. Although Susan was in the 3rd grade, she was studying at a middle school level due to advanced education efforts. There was no allowance for rest. If Susan's test results were poor, Harper would become furious and berate her. Eventually, Harper said, "As a punishment, you'll live in the storage room," and so Susan's meals and study sessions were held there. On top of that, if you can't answer the problems, don't sleep inside the house, she was told, and it seems she slept under the eaves sometimes. Occasionally, Caleb came home from his assignment. However, Harper would act completely normal only during those times. And she made sure to warn, you know what will happen if you tell your dad, right? Making it impossible for anyone to seek help. I was stunned by the outrageousness. Harper wasn't just enthusiastic about education. She was clearly overdoing it. I was trembling with anger. Harper said it was for Susan's future, but this couldn't possibly be for Susan's benefit.
I was drawing this secretly because Mom would get mad if she found out.
Susan showed me a piece of paper. It had a colorful drawing on it. A bright drawing that made anyone looking at it feel happy. Thinking about her drawing her best in such a hellish environment made my heart tighten. Susan didn't want to be a lawyer. It was just Harper saying so on her own. What was she thinking, forcing Susan to do this and lying to us? I looked into Susan's eyes and spoke.
I understand the situation. Thank you for telling me. For now, let's go to our house. Staying in this house isn't good.
The more I heard, the more convinced I became. Harper was not in a state to accept persuasion calmly. First and foremost, we needed to get Susan out of this house. Then, the area near the entrance became noisy. Harper and Ken must have returned.
Susan, wait here for a bit.
I told Susan and left the storage room. I had to confront Harper clearly now. Seeing me coming out of the room, Harper exclaimed,
Hannah, how dare you enter rooms without permission? Did Ken lie about his back pain, and both of you deceived me?
Looking behind Harper, Ken was now standing up straight.
Sorry about that. But you lied too, didn't you? Saying Susan wants to be a lawyer, that's a blatant lie. Locking a child up like that. What were you thinking?
My words made Harper respond with a look of anger.
I haven't lied. Susan is going to be a lawyer. That's been decided.
Ken was completely taken aback by Harper's ugly yelling. The reason she was so obsessed with the lawyer thing. There was an answer in the story I heard from Caleb.
It's not Susan. It was you who wanted to become a lawyer, wasn't it?
Harper was at a loss for words, hit right on the mark. According to Caleb, Harper once aspired to be a lawyer. But she failed the exam. Defeated, she became an office worker. After marrying Caleb and giving birth to Susan, perhaps she remembered her old dream. It seemed she tried to impose her own wishes on her child. After marrying Caleb and giving birth to Susan, perhaps she remembered her old dream. It seemed she tried to impose her own wishes on her child. I said clearly, as if to admonish.
Children are not tools to fulfill your dreams. Sure, studying is important, but not to the extent of forcing them so much. You're trapped in your past self, not seeing Susan as she is now. You're being noisy. What do you know? Becoming a lawyer means a secure future. It's for Susan's sake.
Harper's continued yelling was now just pitiable. Then, the front door opened. The person who entered the living room was Caleb.
Caleb, why?
Harper was confused. Caleb, in his suit, was out of breath. It seems he rushed back from his assignment.
I got a call from Mom, got worried, and came back early. Never thought it'd be something like this.
Ignoring me, Harper desperately tried to appeal to Caleb.
It's a misunderstanding. I just wanted to support Susan's dreams.
Caleb, unfazed by Harper's words, firmly said,
I heard from Mom. You came to borrow money to enroll Susan in an expensive tutoring school? And you even lied that I was on board with it.
Caleb reproached Harper, who momentarily looked guilty. But she quickly regained her composure and began to speak.
This is for her future investment, not just some debt.
Harper mumbled her excuses. At that moment, Caleb picked up a document from the desk.
This tutoring school?
It was an application form for the tutoring school. Nearby, a brochure boasted phrases like dramatic improvement in grades and success in entering competitive schools. Despite already attending a tutoring school, Harper was planning to enroll her in another one. A glance around revealed various books on child education methods scattered about, including an application form for a dubious seminar titled How to Make Your Child a Genius. Surely it was expensive. The amount of money being spent was chilling. Caleb, seeing the application form, was shocked.
It's this expensive. What are you thinking? But, until now, I've been managing with the savings from my single days. It's just that recently it wasn't enough, so I asked your parents for support.
Harper quickly made an excuse. She didn't think she was in the wrong at all. Caleb sighed deeply, seemingly deciding to ignore Harper. Turning back to me, he said tiredly,
"There's no point in talking to Harper anymore. Where's Susan?" "She's in a storage room in the back. She was isolated there, supposedly as punishment for not doing well in her studies. She even has her meals there, and I heard she sleeps under the eaves. I can't bear to leave Susan here."
Hearing this, Caleb exploded. "What? That's unbelievable." Then Susan came out of the room.
"Dad."
She had lost weight, and dark circles were under her eyes. Seeing this, Caleb hugged Susan.
"I'm sorry, Susan. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry."
And then, glaring at Harper, Caleb said,
"I can't leave Susan here any longer. I'm taking her with me." "Yes, that's best. You can't just decide that."
Harper protested, but Caleb shouted back,
"I can't trust you anymore. Reflect on what you've done by yourself for a while."
Harper flinched, falling silent. Leaving Harper standing there, Caleb, Susan, and I left the house. We started walking towards the station. Caleb was still handling calls from work on the way. He seemed extremely busy. After finishing his call, Caleb asked us a favor.
"Sorry, Mom. Work is just too hectic right now. Can you take care of Susan for a while? I'll figure something out once things settle down." "Of course. We'll take good care of Susan, so don't worry. Are you okay, Susan?"
I turned to Susan.
"Yeah, I'm okay."
Susan looked a bit anxious. Maybe Harper's influence was still affecting her. I squeezed her hand to offer some comfort. By the time we got to my parents' house, it had gotten completely dark. Susan finished her dinner and fell asleep right away. She must have been forced to do too much lately. She seemed so worn out.
Poor thing. To force such a child to do all this.
I couldn't help but tear up looking at Susan's sleeping face.
I never imagined it would come to this.
Ken also sighed deeply. Caleb left Susan in our care and went back to his assignment. He said he would try to persuade Harper, but I wondered if he could really do it. My worries were spot on. A week later, I received a call from Caleb. He had been trying to get in touch with Harper in between his busy work schedule. He repeatedly tried to convince Harper how foolish she had been and urged her to change her ways. However, Harper showed no signs of remorse. Instead, she kept saying things like, "Where did you take Susan? She's going to fall behind in her studies. There's a test coming up soon. Are you still saying that? Please, come to your senses," Caleb pleaded, but she quickly retorted.
"I've always been sensible. I'm the one who thinks about Susan the most."
No matter how many hours they talked, they couldn't reach a resolution. Eventually, she started hanging up the phone on him. The situation is making no progress. Discussions about possibly getting a divorce and Caleb formally taking custody of Susan began to emerge. One morning, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door. Harper standing there.
"Harper!
Harper was in her pajamas, her hair was a mess. And her eyes were wild.
Hannah! Susan is here, right? Give her back to me.
Harper barged in, frantically searching for Susan.
What's going on?
Ken was surprised by the sudden visit. Ignoring Ken, Harper rushed upstairs.
Susan! Susan!
I hurried after Harper, and she finally opened the door to Susan's room.
Mom!
Susan exclaimed in surprise upon seeing Harper.
Let's go home, Susan. There's an exam coming up soon. You need to solve these problems. What are you talking about? Susan is.
As I tried to intervene, Harper immediately shouted.
Hannah, please be quiet.
Confused by her mother's sudden appearance, Susan stood up and said firmly,
I'm not going back. How can you say that? I can't become a lawyer. I think studying is important, but I have other things I want to do in the future. Don't decide my future for me, Mom.
Shocked by Susan's firm tone, Harper's face twisted in shock. I embraced Susan's shoulders.
Well said, Susan.
However, Harper glared at me in a rage.
I get it now. You guys brainwashed Susan, didn't you? I won't forgive this. Susan is going to be a lawyer.
How could she come up with such a foolish idea that we were brainwashing Susan? Harper was beyond reasoning with. I raised my voice, though I thought it was futile. I had to say this.
What are you talking about? Wake up. Can't you hear your child's real voice? Susan is suffering because of your actions. You keep saying it's for the child, but you're only thinking about yourself. If you want to be a lawyer, you should make the effort yourself now. It's wrong to force that on Susan.
Harper was silenced by my words, looking frustrated. But then, her eyes sharpened. And she grabbed Susan's arm as if to use force.
Come on, Susan, it's time to study. No! Let me go, Mom!
Harper forcefully dragged Susan out of the room.
Wait!
Susan resisted. In the midst of their struggle, they lost their balance. Careful! Ken shouted. But it was too late, and they tumbled down the stairs.
Susan! Harper!
When I called out, Susan said she was okay and got up, but Harper was motionless. Ken immediately called an ambulance. I was bewildered by the grave situation. Later, Harper was taken to the hospital by ambulance. The MRI showed no brain issues, just a temporary concussion. However, upon regaining consciousness, she seemed unable to distinguish reality, muttering terrifying words repeatedly.
Susan, you need to study. Susan.
This level of obsession was frightening. Then, Harper began to act violently. Suddenly crying out, mistaking nurses for Susan and yelling at them to study. Seeing her condition, the doctor said, it seems her mental state is not well. Harper was referred to a psychiatric unit. Due to her violent outbursts and screaming, it was recommended she be hospitalized for a while. I had sensed something was off, but it seems there was indeed a problem with her mind. After admitting Harper, we contacted her parents. We asked them to come to the hospital and explained Harper's recent behavior. Her parents were pale, likely never imagining their daughter could end up like this. They promised to take good care of Harper from now on. Time passed, and Caleb told Harper he wanted a divorce. Naturally, Harper refused. However, Caleb filed for divorce, and it was eventually granted. Custody of Susan was awarded to Caleb. Later, Harper's parents called us, and we visited the hospital again.
We are so sorry for the trouble caused by her.
In the hospital's lounge, Harper's mother showed her regret and handed us an envelope.
This is the money she borrowed from you for Susan's tutoring fees. She's gone for too much.
It was the $2,000 we lent for Susan's tutoring. Harper's parents had covered it. I looked at them intently. They should be in their 60s, the same as us, but they looked much older. Probably aged by the ordeal.
Thank you for coming. How is Harper?
I asked casually.
Well, she's not doing well. Yelling at anyone to study or screaming you're going to be a lawyer. She'll have to stay here a bit longer. Harper's mother sighed.
It turns out, Harper's parents had always told her to study hard and aim for a respectable profession since she was young. If her grades were poor, they would yell at her.
Maybe we pushed young Harper too hard, and it led to this. It's too late now, but we deeply regret it.
Harper's mother's unexpected confession left me with mixed feelings. This was why Harper had gone mad. The negative cycle had been passed down from her parents to Harper, and then to Susan. But such things must come to an end. I declared resolutely.
Children have their own happiness. Pushing parental ideals too much can break a child's heart. Susan was in danger of going down that path. From now on, Caleb and we will take responsibility and raise Susan in a nurturing environment. Upon hearing this, Harper's mother was in tears.
Maybe she regretted how she treated young Harper. We hoped for a life where Harper, though broken, could be supported moving forward. We left the hospital with these thoughts. Afterward, Susan and Caleb began living with us. Caleb had requested a transfer. He managed to work at a branch close to our home by speaking with his boss. I worried this might affect his promotion, but Caleb reassured it was fine. It's okay. I've been too focused on work and overlooked the discomfort between Harper and Susan. I regret that. Now, I want to pay more attention to Susan, he said with a smile. Luckily, Caleb's understanding boss allowed him to earn his promotion through merit. We were relieved. Susan had regained her brightness since then. Moving here meant she could no longer attend her old school, and I was concerned about her transferring. But Susan said it was better to transfer. At her previous home, study was prioritized over playtime with friends. It led her to become isolated. The transfer allowed her to regain her brightness, and she made many new friends. Now, she's sharing her favorite illustrations with everyone. And dreams of becoming an illustrator. Seeing Susan return to her old self filled me with joy. The future of a child can sometimes be a source of worry. Adults tend to lay tracks too much for them. But that can become mere imposition of ideals if not careful. We can only keep it in mind and quietly watch their growth. The most important thing is Susan's smile. We continue to hope for Susan to grow up healthy and happy.